All right, shalom everyone. So I'm back out here. This is Safa. I'm back out at the park, just hanging out. And I wanted to talk about something today. I wanted to talk about another thing that seems to be like a trigger word for people or a hot phrase that people like to use that I don't know if we are truly understanding what we're talking about. So that's I'm sorry, that camera just does what it wants to do. Um, and that's the term karma. You know, everyone talks about karma. Um, like I've seen when people get murdered and people start posting these videos, a lot of people are like, well, that's just karma. Or a person like uh, uh, goes into a financial debt or is financially ruined. We just, most people say, well, that's karma. He got that because of this, and I don't know if we know exactly what it means. So I thought I'd first define what karma is, and then from there talk about how it's affecting us, and then also talk about how maybe we can start breaking some of these cycles, because it's easy to sense. For one who's sensible, it's easy to tell what's going on if a person is sensitive to how life is moving. So first of all, karma, the word karma comes from the word kri. The word kri is a Sanskrit word. It's a root word that means like to do, to make, but it literally means like work. So it's like actions. So karma is sort of like not only the actions that we take, but the reaction that comes back from those actions. But it gets a little bit deeper. So you have karma, which is the actions or the works, the things that we do. And they have an action, and then there's also a reaction. Science talks about this all the time in physics. Then you have something called a karmasaya. Karmasaya is like the storehouse of karma, right? It's where the accumulation of the samskara are. Samskara are mental impressions, memories, thought patterns, and like these are like imprints, subconscious impressions that happen on our mind. So that's what the karmasya. The karmasya is a storehouse of samskara. Samskara is the impressions, and these things are making imprints on the chitta. Now, chitta's like in intellect, intelligence, ego, and the mind, right? The mind is manas. Manas is like the function of thinking and organizing thoughts. So like you're going to be thinking, the way you can think and organize thoughts within the intellect and within the ego is through the mind. So again, I'll recap. So we have karma, action and reaction. We have karmasya, which is like the storehouse of karma, through samskara. Samskara being mental impressions that are happening on the intellect and on the ego through the mind. Okay? I don't want to lose people. I try not to use such big words or such I try to dumb it down a little bit, because if we get it simply, then we can apply it to our lives. So the thing that is the karmasya is really like the intellect. The intellect is where the ego is the ego's playing field, so to speak, the intellect. So this is where all of your karma is being stored. It's being stored in the intellect. So whatever is done in the body, the mind, and the energy, it leaves an imprint or residue that forms a pattern of its own. And these residues or these patterns stay with you. When you gather a huge volume of impressions, slowly these shape, themselves into tendencies and you become like an automaton. You become like a robot, an android that's just a slave to your patterns. You become a slave to your patterns. Over time, these patterns, as we know, can become deadly, right? So memory is a product of this samskara. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, how memory is a part of that samskara. But it is important to know that patterns control us from within. They don't control us from without. You don't need anyone to control you externally, because there's always something ruling over you within you. There's patterns, right? So you may think that it's a new day or you're living a new day, but the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? So it's not physical, but it's experientially through your experience. Though it might not be physically the same thing happening, experience-wise, you're experiencing a lot of the same things, right? But we have to understand that karma is not a negative word, right? Karma gives us stability and it gives us structure in our lives. Remember I said that karma is memory is the product of karma, or samskara, mental impressions. Memory is the product of karmic impressions on our mind. So if you rejected all the karma, you wouldn't even function as a human being. You wouldn't know how to open a door. You wouldn't know how to drive a car and all these different things, because you're basically asking yourself to wipe your memory. So that's what I think a lot of people don't understand, is that if we wipe out karma, like no one wants to incur karma, but if we wipe out karma, you would not be able to function. You'd be like a baby. You'd be like a baby with no experiences on how to handle anything, right? You wouldn't know the difference between, you wouldn't understand that you couldn't walk through a brick wall. You have to walk through a door. Things like this, these basic things you would lose because you would lose all of your karma. So we need karma in certain ways. We have to understand that there's no such thing as good karma and there's no such thing as bad karma. That's like saying we have good bondage and bad bondage. It's all bondage. So it's not a good thing or it's not a bad thing. If you want transformation, right? If you want transformation, you're going to have to break the cycles of the patterns, though. You're going to have to break the cycles of the patterns of karma. Anything that's cyclical suggests that it's always in motion, right? If you're sensible, like I said, you realize these things at a young age. If you're me, you don't realize it until you're a little bit older. After a while, I started to notice, like, hey, man, things keep happening over and over again. About 4 or 5 years ago, I started to see, like, man, I keep finding myself in the same exact situations. And it was almost laughable at a certain point that I would keep finding myself in the same predicaments. Like, it would be like a year. It was always like a year and 3 months. Every year and 3 months. It's crazy. The same things would keep happening to me. And I'll spare you the gory details. But, right, there's a lot of people where it seems like everything's going right in their life, right? Everything's going right in your life, but you feel like you're getting nowhere. I always say the faster a person realizes their dreams, they can learn this lesson. They can learn this lesson that it's not fulfilling, right? For me, it was when I was working at a marketing company. I was working a lot of days straight, and I can't even tell you how many days straight I worked. This was a number of years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago. I lose track of time easily. But it was about 5 or 6 years ago where I was working a bunch of days straight, over a month. It had to be like 40 something days straight. But I got a check. For about and I had been doing pretty decent for a while financially. Where for me, I've never really had much money. My whole life, I've never really had much money at all. I've never really owned that many things. I've always just been getting by. And the little bit of money I ever had, I was always like trying to make movies and stuff. So we were maxing out credit cards, doing all types of crazy, irresponsible things, trying to be filmmakers. But I was at this marketing company. Things were going well, pretty well. But I had came to a point where 1 month, I think I got a check for about $5,000. And then like the next month or the month after that, I got a check for about $8,500, almost 10 grand. I can't think of it, but it was so much money for me. And it just seemed like things were just going to get better. And obviously they did, because we moved our offices from the city of Ontario to the city of Los Angeles. And for a while, things seemed to be getting better. But when these things started to happen to me, that's what it struck me, because I started to see that I wasn't fulfilled, that financial security and these things were not doing it for me. And that's when I started to get into bhakti. Bhakti just means devotion, where I literally just tried to contact God. I literally was basically saying, like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what your name is, right? But I know you exist, and I want to know more about you. And from there, my life started to take a drastic change. But that's my experience with karma. That's my experience with samskara, and with experience with patterns, and with the experience of achieving a goal, or feeling like you've achieved a goal, but still feeling wanting, like you are wanting. So until we break these cycles, you really aren't making choices in your life, though. Until you break the patterns, you're really not making choices in your life. Even if you feel like you're making the choices, when you truly understand what's going on inside of you, you understand that you are not the one making your choices. Your cravings, your impulses, your compulsions, they're actually the things that are making the choices in your life. So the process of living is what dissolves karma. The process of living. So we say, now we understand what karma is, and we understand how it's affecting our lives, that it's just keeping us in these patterns. Everything's a Groundhog Day. We have to understand that the process of living dissolves karma. If you live every day in the moment, from moment to moment, not in the moment, because every moment's always passing, but if you live your days from moment to moment with total involvement, right? If you live it with total involvement in every moment, you're going to dissolve a large amount of karma. This is why on my social media sites, I always talk about just do what you're doing. If you're at work, just work. If you're in the shower, just wash, right? If you're having a conversation with a friend, listen attentively, right? If you're walking, just walk. Enjoy the scenery. Enjoy the walking, right? If you do these things, this is why Sadhguru teaches that sports is one of the best ways to do it, because you can't play a sport without a level of involvement. You can't be absent-minded playing sport, especially baseball. You're going to get hit in the head with a ball. Basketball, that game's moving so fast, you're right there in the moment. Football as well, you could be hurt very badly by not paying attention to what you're doing in a sport. So this is why sports help a person to concentrate on one thing, right? See, back in the days they used to just teach that, you just have to meditate, you just have to go to the Himalayas. No. What we're just trying to do is get concentration and total involvement in life. That's really all we're trying to do, right? Experiencing everything that comes your way, absolutely. Every breath, right? Experiencing every breath with intensity. There is no distraction of thought. There is no distraction of emotion when you're experiencing, sorry, I just keep vibing with the camera. The camera's doing its own thing. But when you're experiencing life, then there's no room for other thoughts to creep in. There's no room for other emotions to creep in. And there's no room for psychological dramas to start playing out in your head. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. There's a lot of psychological drama going on in people's heads, right? But if we can do actions, right? Karma means action. If we could do actions completely involved with them without distraction, we can dissolve a lot of karma. The thing about yoga is yoga offers a way to place some distance between you and your karma. Performing meditation, performing mantras, breathing techniques, postures. If you perform these things with a level of intensity, there's no room for anything else. And that's what I always tell people when I initiate them into Hatha yoga, or when I discuss Hatha yoga with people. I say, if the difference between a novice and a master yogi is a master yogi or yogini, ladies, a master is doing the postures completely involved. They're just focusing on that. They're just focusing on the breathing technique. They're just focusing on the mantra. You don't have to be the most flexible person to achieve the goal of yoga. Matter of fact, most people who are master flexors, or whatever you call them, master posers, so to speak, that's just good exercise. That's just being a good athlete. And yoga is not about being athletic. Believe me, it wasn't created to be athletic. And I would argue that there are better exercises. If you're just trying to get like what weightlifting and cardio and stuff like that, there are better exercises than yoga. But what yoga gives, a lot of these other things can't give, right? Now, this is where we have to choose between, it allows you to choose between being a victim and about being a spectator, and about being the master of your life. That comes with being able to break these patterns so that we can be the ones making the choices in our life. We're not a slave to our patterns. So a few things that you can get involved with to learn this is karma yoga. Karma yoga is the path of action. It's the performance of one's duties without the desires for the outcome, right? Performing your duties without desiring an outcome. I talk about it a lot on social media about how we should stop. We should just do our duty for the sake of our duty, not so that something good will happen. A lot of I come from a Christian background, so I'll use it as an example. What we learned in Christianity was like, give and it shall be given unto you. And I think we misunderstand what that is teaching. Because the Father's storehouse, the Father's treasures are spiritual. But through the elevating of the spiritual world within you, the spiritual dimension within you, it will manifest in your physical world. But to do these things specifically for material gain, it's actually incurring negativity upon you. It's actually incurring negativity upon you. People should be good for the sake of goodness. People should be devoted to God for the sake of devotion, not so that they get something in return, right? Not so that they get something in return. So karma yoga is just about, and you see how this is a form of yoga that we have not talked about any postures, because yoga is not about postures. Postures is a small portion of yoga. Postures are great, and postures can help achieve enlightenment, but it is not only about doing the postures. The majority of it is what we do off of that mat. The majority of it is what we do when we're not meditating. It's can we pull meditativeness into our everyday life? The beginning of that will be karma yoga, which is doing your duties without expecting something in return. You also have Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga consists of like they call it tapas. Tapas is like severe or like really, really disciplined. It's like being really, really disciplined. So Kriya Yoga is about using tapas, severe discipline. It's about studying, and it's about devotion to God. So if you can develop a level of discipline, a good study habit, meaning studying on things about self-mastery, not just anything, but it is good to know about physics and math. And if somebody wants to teach me, that would be awesome. But I'm speaking specifically about scripture. Whether you observe the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, or you observe the Christian Bible, the Brit Hadashah, the Gospels, or you observe the Quran, or the Lotus Sutras, or the Bhagavad Gita, right? Or the Upanishads, or the Vedas, whatever you observe, the Tao, whatever you observe, it's about studying these things and getting the essence out of it so that we can apply it to our lives. I personally think that all of these books have a lot to gain. Even as I am I consider myself to be part of the Hebraic community. That is the community that I'm most active in. So the Tanakh is what I builds my foundation. But the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, the Gospels, and also the Quran are very influential on my life, but as well as the Bhagavad Gita, but more importantly, the Upanishadic texts, and most importantly, the Yoga Sutras. Because the Yoga Sutras have developed a way I've found a way through the Yoga Sutras to take what I'm learning in the Tanakh and the Hebraic walk and putting it into action, not just the basic morality stuff, but the spiritual things that are alluded to, but there's never a step-by-step process on how to get this. Yoga helps us discover these step-by-step process. So I hope that helps people get a better idea about karma. So that we have a simple understanding of something, so that we can apply it to our lives, so that we can derive benefits, right? So I hope that was simple enough. I know a lot of people are telling me they're having to watch the video more than once. There are terms I'm using that I'm trying to get away from, but it's how I understand it. But there's terms I'm using that I know that aren't necessarily familiar. And there are parallel terms in Hebrew and whatnot, since my audience is mostly Hebrews. There are parallel terms that are in the Hebrew language that I decided not to translate, because what's happening is a lot of these Hebraic terms are starting to trigger false notions, right? They're triggering false notions because of the samskara, the karmasaya, the karmic storehouse. When I say certain words in certain languages, it's not resonating the correct way. It's resonating with the fingerprints of preconceived notions, and it's resonating with prejudices. So I decide not to use these, and I'm introducing different terms so that we can start from a clean slate. But if you search the scriptures, you'll see that all of this kind of lines up the same way, if that's what you want to do. But I hope it helps. I hope it made a little bit of sense. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think about it. If you have any questions, as always, through the DM. A lot of you have my WhatsApp number now. There, you can make a comment here on YouTube, though most people don't really dig on that. But either way, I hope this is helpful, because it's something that's been very helpful to me, to help me see the world as it is, and to start to understand why these things keep happening to me as they did. So yeah, peace and love, everybody. I hope you have a good week. Shalom.